Part 1. We were swingers. Until my wife fell in love with our guest. I never thought I'd be the kind of man to share my wife with another man. Or another woman, for that matter. But life, as I've learned the hard way, has a way of pulling you into situations you swore you'd never find yourself in. When Claire and I first got married, we were the cliché of suburban bliss. A modern house, stable jobs, a dog that behaved better than most kids, and a circle of friends who envied how perfect we looked together. We had a spark that people noticed. The kind of spark that drew attention at parties. The kind that made people joke about how we must have an open secret in the bedroom. It was all fun and laughter until one night, after too much wine, Claire leaned across the table, gave me that mischievous smile of hers, and said, "What if we actually tried it? You know, an open arrangement. Just for fun." I laughed at first, because I thought she was joking. But she wasn't. Claire was always the adventurous one. She was bold, curious, and had this way of making even the most dangerous ideas sound harmless. She framed it not as cheating, not as betrayal, but as exploration, an upgrade to our marriage rather than a threat. "It's just sex," she said that night, twirling her glass. "We have rules. No feelings. No drama. Just fun. Like a vacation from reality." And here's the thing. I agreed. Not because I was desperate. Not because I was bored. But because, in a twisted way, it felt like proof of how strong we were. If we could bring others into our bed and still laugh, still love, still come home to each other, then surely nothing could break us. We set rules. Strict ones. 1. We do everything together. No solo adventures. 2. No repeat guests. One night, one time. 3. Most important, no feelings. Ever. It worked. At first. We met couples, singles, the occasional curious stranger who had been watching us from across a bar. We laughed. We experimented. And after each encounter, Claire and I would collapse into each other's arms, reaffirming that we were the core. Everyone else was just background noise. Until him. His name was Daniel. I'll never forget the night he walked into our lives. We had gone to one of those underground, exclusive swinger parties that Claire had read about online. Unlike the casual bars or apps, this one was more curated. Dim lights, velvet couches, jazz in the background, champagne flowing like water. Everyone was dressed like they had walked out of some secret fashion magazine spread, confident, beautiful, dangerous. Daniel stood out immediately. He wasn't loud or flashy. He wasn't even the best-looking guy in the room. But he carried himself with this quiet intensity, a calmness that made others gravitate toward him. And Claire, my wife, my partner, my rule maker, couldn't take her eyes off him. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But I told myself it was fine. We were supposed to look. That was the point. When he finally approached us, his voice was smooth, deliberate. He complimented Claire in a way that didn't feel rehearsed. And for the first time in years, I saw her blush. We broke our second rule that night. Daniel wasn't a one-time guest. At first, it was subtle. We invited him back once, then twice. Always under the guise of just one more time. I told myself it was harmless because I was there, because we were still together, because Claire still kissed me goodnight. But Daniel wasn't like the others. He didn't fade into the background. He stayed. I caught the first red flag one night when Claire's phone buzzed at 1 a.m. She was asleep beside me, but the name lighting up her screen was his. Daniel. When I asked her about it the next morning, she brushed it off. He just wanted to check in. He's thoughtful. Thoughtful. That word stuck in my chest like a knife. From then on, I started noticing patterns. Claire would dress differently when we knew Daniel was coming. She would laugh more easily around him. She would defend him when I made harmless jokes at his expense. And the worst part? The way her eyes lingered on him when she thought I wasn't looking. Then came Paris. I found out by accident. She told me she was going on a work trip. I didn't question it, because why would I? Claire had never given me a reason to doubt her. But 2 days later, when I was cleaning the kitchen, I found a receipt tucked in her purse, 2 tickets, one hotel room, Paris, and the name next to hers on the booking, Daniel. I can't describe the feeling that hit me in that moment. My chest went cold, my throat closed, and for the first time since we started this whole open marriage experiment, I realized I had lost control. This wasn't just sex anymore. Claire had broken our only unbreakable rule: no feelings. When she came back, glowing, radiant, carrying a little Eiffel Tower keychain as if that would somehow cover the betrayal, I confronted her. She didn't deny it. She didn't even cry. Instead, she said something that shattered me in a way no affair, no betrayal, no secret ever could. I think I'm in love with him. And that was when I realized my marriage wasn't just in danger. It was already gone. But here's the thing about betrayal. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't go back. You can only move forward, no matter how ugly forward looks. And I wasn't about to lose everything without a fight. Because if Claire thought she could rewrite the rules, then so could I. Part 2. We were swingers. Until my wife fell in love with our guest. When Claire confessed that she was in love with Daniel, I expected tears. I expected apologies, maybe even denial. But instead, she looked at me with this strange calm, as if she had already rehearsed the conversation 100 times in her head. "I didn't plan this," she said softly, her hands folded in her lap like a child caught doing something wrong but not feeling guilty. "I swear I didn't. It just happened." That phrase, "it just happened," made my stomach twist. Nothing just happens. You make choices. You decide to cross lines. You decide to let someone in. And Claire had decided. For the first few days after her confession, I walked through the house like a ghost. Every corner, every piece of furniture, every photo on the walls felt tainted. I'd look at our wedding picture, the one where she was beaming at me like I was the only man in the world, and I'd wonder if Daniel's face had replaced mine in her memory. She didn't act guilty. If anything, she seemed relieved, like a weight had been lifted now that the secret was out. She still cooked dinner, still laughed at the dog's antics, still asked me about my day. But there was a distance, an invisible wall that hadn't been there before. I became obsessed with finding cracks in her story. Where was she really going when she said she was working late? Why was her phone suddenly glued to her hand? Why did she smile at texts she wouldn't show me? The answers came faster than I expected. One night, after she fell asleep, I took her phone. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it, but eventually I got in. I wish I hadn't. The messages were endless. Claire and Daniel had been talking every single day. Good mornings, good nights, jokes, inside references, photos. He wasn't just her lover. He was her best friend, her confidant, the man she turned to for everything. And then there were the plans. Paris had only been the beginning. A weekend in Rome was next. Then a cabin getaway 2 hours outside the city. And after that, Claire wrote, "Maybe we don't need to keep pretending. Maybe it's time I close one chapter and start another." I couldn't breathe. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning a life with him. I confronted her again, phone in hand, texts glowing on the screen like neon signs of betrayal. Her response? Not denial. Not shame, just a tired sigh. I didn't want you to find out this way, she whispered. But yes, I love him. And I think I want to be with him. That was the moment I snapped. So what was all of this? The parties? The rules? The promises? I demanded, my voice shaking. Was I just a placeholder until someone better came along? Claire's eyes filled with tears for the first time. But not for me. For him. No, it wasn't like that, she pleaded. You have to understand. We started this together. But Daniel, he makes me feel something I didn't know I was missing. I didn't mean to fall in love, but I can't stop it. The next few weeks were hell. Every day was a battlefield between us. I wanted her to cut him off, to prove that our marriage still meant something. She refused. You can't ask me to erase what I feel, she told me one night, her voice trembling but firm. That isn't fair. Fair. She was lecturing me about fairness while sneaking off to meet another man. It got worse. She stopped hiding it. She'd leave the house dressed up, telling me she was going out with friends. She'd disappear for hours, come back smelling of cologne that wasn't mine. Sometimes she didn't even come back until morning. The final blow came when I overheard a phone call. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the bathroom door was cracked open, and her voice carried. I can't wait either, she whispered, giggling like a teenager. Soon. I'll tell him soon. We'll be free. Free. That was when I realized. She wasn't planning to fix our marriage. She was planning to end it. For him. But here's the part she didn't expect. I wasn't just going to sit back and watch her dismantle the life we built. If Claire wanted Daniel so badly, fine, she could have him. But she wasn't going to walk away clean. She wasn't going to rewrite our story as if I had been the villain and he was the savior. No, if she wanted war, she was going to get it. And my revenge would be careful, calculated, and devastating. Because if Daniel had stolen my wife's heart, then I was going to make sure he paid for it, and so did she. Part 3. We were swingers. Until my wife fell in love with our guest. There's a strange moment that happens after betrayal. The grief, the tears, the shouting, all of that burns itself out eventually, leaving behind a numb kind of clarity. It's like standing in the wreckage of a house that's burned to the ground. You can either walk away or start planning how you'll rebuild. I didn't want to rebuild. I wanted to destroy. The first step was simple. I needed proof. If Claire was going to leave me for Daniel, she wasn't going to waltz out of our marriage with half the assets and a sympathy card. I wasn't going to be the pathetic husband in her story, the poor guy who couldn't handle an open marriage. So I began collecting everything. Screenshots of her texts with Daniel. Photos of her leaving our house at midnight in dresses she never wore for me. Call logs that stretched for hours when she told me she was at the gym. I became a detective in my own home. I tracked her movements with apps, checked receipts, even rifled through her trash when she wasn't looking. The more I found, the angrier I became. Not just at her, but at myself. How had I let it get this far? How had I convinced myself that we were strong enough to survive this lifestyle? Every rule we made had been broken, every promise shattered. And yet, Claire acted like I was the unreasonable one for not accepting her feelings. The second step, I needed allies. I reached out to Mark, my closest friend. He was the one guy who always had my back, the one who warned me years ago that open marriages always end in disaster. When I finally told him everything, he stared at me like I had admitted to letting a wolf babysit my chickens. You gave her permission to cheat, and now you're shocked she upgraded? He said bluntly. I hated hearing it, but he was right. Still, when I showed him the messages, even he shook his head. Man, she's gone. She's not just sleeping with him. She's planning a whole future. I nodded, my throat tight. That's why I'm not letting her walk away clean. Mark leaned in. So what's the play? And that's when the seeds of my revenge began to take shape. The third step, understand the enemy. Daniel wasn't just some fling. He was careful, calculated, the kind of man who knew how to charm his way into a woman's life and never let go. If I was going to dismantle their relationship, I needed to know who he really was. So I dug. I started with the basics: social media, LinkedIn, public records. Daniel had crafted this perfect image of a successful, worldly man, well-traveled, cultured, financially stable. But cracks started to show. His business was drowning in debt. He'd been sued twice by former partners. And worst of all, he had a reputation for getting close to married women. I wasn't the first husband he'd stepped on. The more I uncovered, the more focused I became. Daniel wasn't just a thief, he was a parasite, and Claire was his newest host. The turning point came 2 weeks later. Claire came home one evening, flushed and glowing, tossing her heels into the hallway like a teenager sneaking back past curfew. She kissed me on the cheek, mechanical, distracted, then disappeared into the bedroom. I followed her quietly. She didn't notice me standing in the doorway as she pulled a small velvet box out of her purse. Inside was a necklace, delicate, expensive, clearly from him. She held it against her neck, staring at herself in the mirror with a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. That was it, the final straw. She wasn't just cheating anymore. She was already halfway out the door, rehearsing her new life, imagining herself as Daniel's prize. And I realized something in that moment. If Claire wanted Daniel so badly, the only way to break them apart was to make her see him for who he truly was. Step 4. Set the trap. I knew Daniel's weaknesses now. His debts, his lawsuits, his pattern of seducing married women. But Claire wouldn't believe me if I just told her. No, she needed to see it, to experience the ugly truth firsthand. So I started planting seeds. Subtle at first. One evening over dinner, I casually mentioned a headline I'd seen about a local business filing bankruptcy. Daniel's business. Claire froze, her fork midair. That's not true, she snapped. Daniel's company is doing fine. I shrugged, pretending to be indifferent. Maybe, just something I read. Another time, I left a stack of printed court documents by accident on my desk, knowing Claire snooped through my things sometimes. They were real, pulled from public records, lawsuits, unpaid debts, liens. Sure enough, a week later, I caught her reading them in silence, her brow furrowed. She didn't say a word, but the doubt was there. I saw it flicker in her eyes. But I wasn't done. The ultimate move came when I tracked Daniel's movements just as carefully as I tracked Claire's. And one night, my patience paid off. Daniel wasn't just seeing Claire. He was meeting another woman, a brunette in her mid-30s who greeted him at a hotel with a kiss that was far too familiar. I nearly laughed. The predator couldn't even keep his focus on one victim at a time. This was the weapon I needed. The final step, expose. I waited for the perfect moment. Claire was already restless, torn between me and Daniel, between her marriage and her fantasy. So one night, when she came home late, I was waiting for her. On the TV, I had queued up the hotel footage. Daniel, hand in hand with the brunette, kissing her like she was the only woman in his world. Claire froze in the doorway, her face draining of color. No, she whispered, shaking her head. That can't be him. But it was. And I had more. Texts, photos, receipts. Proof that while she was planning to throw away her marriage for him, He was already lining up his next victim. Claire crumbled. She sank onto the couch, staring at the screen with wide, glassy eyes. For the first time in months, she looked at me, really looked at me, and there was no defiance, no passion, only devastation. He said I was different, she whispered. He said he loved me. I wanted to laugh in her face, to scream, to tell her how foolish she'd been. But instead, I just stood there, silent, watching her world collapse the way she had collapsed mine. But here's the thing. As satisfying as it was to watch Claire's fantasy shatter, my revenge wasn't complete yet. Because it wasn't enough to show her the truth. I wanted Daniel to pay, and I wanted Claire to feel the full weight of what she had chosen. And trust me, the finale was going to make Paris, Rome, and every stolen night look like child's play. Part 4. We were swingers. Until my wife fell in love with our guest. The look on Claire's face the night I showed her Daniel's betrayal will stay with me forever. Her skin went pale, her lips trembled, her eyes darted back and forth as if she was waiting for the screen to lie to her, to tell her it wasn't him, to tell her the fantasy was still real. But it wasn't. The man she was ready to throw away our marriage for was already moving on to his next guest. For a moment, I thought maybe that was enough. Maybe showing her the truth, letting her sit in the ruins of her own choices, would give me closure. But the anger in me was deeper than that. Too much had been taken, too much broken. I wasn't just after closure. I wanted destruction. Stage 1, the break. The days after the reveal were surreal. Claire barely spoke. She drifted around the house like a ghost, avoiding my eyes, her phone untouched on the counter. I'd hear her crying at night when she thought I was asleep. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but every sob only reminded me of the months she spent laughing with him, lying to me, choosing him. So I stayed cold. You wanted him, I said one morning over coffee, my tone flat. Now you know who he really is. She flinched, but didn't answer. And that's when I knew I had her exactly where I wanted her. Fragile, broken, exposed. Stage 2, the trap. Daniel didn't know yet that I had dirt on him. He was still reaching out to Claire, still dangling promises, still trying to keep her hooked. So I answered one of his messages, pretending to be her. Meet me Friday. Same hotel. He replied instantly. I'll be there. But Claire wouldn't be. I would. Friday night. I sat in the corner of the hotel bar, hidden in plain sight. Daniel walked in, confident as ever, scanning the room for the woman he thought was his next conquest. Instead, he found me. His smile faltered. What the hell are you doing here? I leaned back, calm, collected. Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing. He tried to brush past me, but I slid a folder across the table. Inside, every debt, every lawsuit, every piece of proof that his life was one big collapsing lie. On top of it all, a USB drive, hotel footage of him with the brunette. You've been busy, I said. But here's the deal. You disappear. From Claire, from me, from this city. Because if you don't, every person you've ever done business with will get a copy of this. And I'll make sure every woman you're chasing knows exactly what you are. Daniel's face went pale. He knew I wasn't bluffing. Men like him only survive in the shadows. I was dragging him into the light. Without another word, he grabbed the folder, stuffed it into his bag, and left. I never saw him again. Stage 3, the reckoning. When I got home, Claire was waiting. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Where were you? She asked, her voice trembling. Cleaning up your mess, I replied. She didn't argue. She didn't fight. For once, she had nothing left to defend. That night, she begged me to forgive her. She promised she'd cut off all contact, swore she would do anything to rebuild what we had. But the truth was, there was nothing left to rebuild. I had loved Claire. I had trusted her. I had shared every part of myself with her. And she had thrown it all away for a man who didn't even care enough to stay loyal. So I did what she never expected. The next morning, I packed her bags. When she came downstairs, the suitcases were waiting by the door. Her eyes widened, her hands trembling. "You're kicking me out?" she whispered. I looked at her, calm and final. "You already left, Claire. The only difference is now it's official." Stage 4, the finale. Word spread fast among our circle of friends. Everyone knew about the open marriage, but no one had known about the secret trips, the necklace, the Paris getaway. I didn't hide it anymore. I let people see the texts, the photos, the proof. If Claire thought she could walk away from me and play the victim, she was wrong. By the end of the month, Daniel had vanished, and Claire was living in a small apartment on the edge of town. Her reputation shredded. Friends who once envied her now whispered behind her back. The glamorous, adventurous woman who wanted to explore had become the cautionary tale. And me? I was free. Not in the way she thought she'd be with Daniel, but truly free. Free from lies, from games, from the poison of a marriage built on rules that were only meant to be broken. I sometimes think back to those early days, the laughter, the thrill, the nights we convinced ourselves we were untouchable. But the truth is simple. We were never untouchable. We were just naive. And when you play with fire long enough, eventually, you get burned.